Welcome to the 26th episode of the GameFor Podcast. In this episode, still recording from home, we'll be joined by our guest Lee Gaddies from Gaddis Gaming. This episode of the GameFor Podcast is brought to you by TurboDork, radical paints to make your gray world colorful. I'm Adam.
I'm Matt, and joining us today...
Hi, I'm Lee.
We've got Lee from Gaddis Gaming. With the GameFor Podcast is about, it's us talking about the overall kind of gaming community landscape and that kind of thing. But GameFor is an app that's designed for connecting tabletop gamers. Currently, it's not a real good idea to be connecting, but we are still going forward with the podcast so that people can find out more about how to kind of get together and find out more about gaming and find out how to get started in gaming and all that kind of stuff. And we're talking to Lee today because we've known Lee for quite a while, and Lee's got a game company that is kind of I don't want to say it's a one-man organization, but
no,
it's a smaller but it's definitely it's a smaller organization, and we wanted to talk and find out some more about kind of how you got started and things like that. Matt, what have you been doing recently with your hobby time here in lockdown?
Yeah, so more D&D, wonderful D&D. My PayPal is getting exercised as I buy more and more Sprite packs from Roll20. So helping out all the artists out there.
Nice.
And my characters dinged level 8 last night, so they have made it through the second level. And are on to the third level. So the story and bad guys and everything are definitely ramping up. So it's becoming a lot of fun. We're at the point now where everybody's got a good backstory. So we can kind of reference things. There's in jokes and stuff like that. So it's getting a lot of fun. And then as I've been kind of redoing the area in my gaming basement, I had to kind of remove stuff around. I've been kind of taking inventory and trying to figure out what my next project is going to be. So I've got some stuff started, but I don't know. I've got to find something that's really going to captivate me when I can kind of sit down and paint and assemble.
Gotcha. Cool. All right.
How about you?
Well, I've been working on Warcry terrain pieces mostly. It's been fun. It's been interesting. It's nearly done, and we're to the point where I've done all the stone bits, and I've done all of those. I've got a little touch ups here and there, but otherwise there's like the wooden barricade bits, and there's a lot of skulls. And so there's a lot of that, and I'm trying to get those last bits finished and everything, and then we'll be able to go from there. And then with the help of my wonderful wife, then we made some real headway on the basement, actually. The basement cleaning has been very slow and not really happening for quite some time. And so now it is, and I've made some definite headway, set up a bunch of shelves, started clearing some space. One of the big benefits to
pictures, those look good.
Yeah. One of the big benefits of clearing space is it'll allow me to finally get my computer desk set up and all that kind of stuff down there. I've got a little desk right now with a laptop on it and everything, but I'm still mainly up here in the dining room, which is where I'm recording this. But the idea is to move downstairs. So
nice.
That's where I'm at right now.
All right, and Lee, what have you been up to?
Well, as you know, we have been trying to get our orders out. Business kind of picked up as this crisis kicked in, but our access to manufacturing has been down to once a week. So we've been going in and casting as much as we can on that one day, but it's a lot of cleaning and stuff involved and getting orders out to people. So we're still in business, and it's really interesting because our orders have picked up as people have more hobby time at home, but our ability, so it's great to see us being consistent about orders coming in. So we haven't had a real drop off yet, but our ability to go in, we're about 10 to 14 days behind on our ordering. which has given me some personal hobby time. So I've been working on new sculpts and adding new miniatures to the lines, and then painting up some projects just to break up the monotony, just for relief. So I've had I've had this Imperial Guard army sitting on hold for about 4 years, and I was just kit bashed, and I wanted to have some guys that were like heavily armored, but were Imperial Guard. They weren't like Space Marines. And so while I was, sourcing that, Anvil Industries came out with their new Exolords line, and the sculpts are absolutely beautiful for them, but they're more Space Marine-y. But then they had some other, I think, Rebellion guys that have armored feet and legs and shins, which is what I wanted. I wanted the knees to be covered. I wanted the shins to be covered. And I wanted the thighs to have armor on it. And so I think I'm going to buy those and add them with my Imperial Guard Cadian arms and chests. And that'll give me really the look, that I want for that. So that's the hobby project, my long-term hobby project in my mind. The problem is I have 150 Imperial Guard miniatures.
Yeah, that's always the issue, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah, no, that stuff from Anvil Industries was really nice looking. I've seen between them and Puppets War, both of them have been doing really nice power armor that I don't find to be super like derivative, let's say, but they really nice looking stuff though. I really like them.
I think it's a universal sci-fi look, which is what I was looking for. I didn't want it to be 40K-ish. It didn't have to be high Gothic. I wanted so that I could use it in any of it. So if I wanted to, some guys are doing a Dune game that we were supposed to meet up and run at Adepticon, which of course was going to happen. So I painted up a 5-man squad to run that. And also they're doing a game called Dark Zero from the same guy who made Horizon Wars, and I love Horizon Wars.
Oh yeah,
yeah. So that's what I do all my 10 and 12 millimeter gaming in is Horizon Wars.
Nice.
That's my go-to game system. So they're miniatures agnostic, and so I wanted to do some practicing with our sci-fi rule set coming off of Shattered Crown and Empire Falls, which, as you know, we released a couple of years ago with our World War One. And Empire Falls, we were going to kick off this year with our World War Two addition to the Guards rule system. So, the internal company stuff is keeping pretty busy. But to just like I said, to break up that monotony, I've been working on my own personal hobby projects that I then use to run demos and stuff at conventions. But I like their look of that universal generic sci-fi, and then by kit bashing, you can really make some unique sculpts by using Anvil or Puppets War.
Or lots of companies, yeah.
Yeah, there's lots of Victoria Miniatures. I mean, I got her kangaroo stuff when they were doing the Australian relief wildfire. And then, so we fall into that range too as a company because we do one-off weird war stuff. Even with the Kickstarter we just launched with the ball tank, you have 6 different weapon options, so you can use those for anything. And a lot of people were telling me that they wanted to buy them just to have the weapons to use in other things that they're creating.
Have you been looking for a way to make your miniatures stand out on the tabletop? Turbo Dork is a radical line of metallic and turbo shift paints that will make your gray world colorful. Turbo shift paints change colors as you move your models around and are great for spell effects, visors, weapons, and much more. Or let's say that you wanted to make your minis truly metal, but colorful. Check out their metallic paints with colors like People Eater Purple, Spicy Meatball Red, and All That Glitters Gold. I'm using the dark net color from Turbo Dork on. I'm starting on it, just trying it with a brush to see what it looks like. It works best, I think, with obviously with the airbrush, but sometimes you want to just get it in like a certain spot and not get it all over the model. And so I've been messing with that a little bit. You need to lay down the right color underneath it because the bottles each say like what color is the color that should be the undercoat. Sometimes it's a silver metallic. Sometimes it's like a gloss black. It depends on the color. But yeah, it's kind of cool. I'm really looking forward to, and I keep talking about this, but I'm looking forward to doing this on my Tyranids. But like I said earlier, I've been cleaning the basement a little bit more, so and doing the Warcry terrain, and that's been my hobby time for right now, unfortunately. So, if you need to add some color to your tabletop life, TurboDork has you covered. Check with your local retailer or hit the TurboDork website at www.turbodork.com. And thank you to TurboDork for sponsoring the GameFor Podcast.
Very appreciated.
Absolutely.
So Lee, you kind of briefly talked about this a little bit. So your game Shattered Crown and the upcoming Empire's Fall for this that's coming in this fall are games that are around like weird gaming. Can you kind of explain more to people that aren't maybe familiar with that, what that is, and then kind of like what drew you to doing weird gaming?
Sure. So for me and my play group, we had a play group that was about 12 people, and it was called the General Assembly of Gamers, right? We're just a General Assembly. So we would meet up at our local game store, and then we would play. So we started off with like Bolt Action, and then of course people wanted to play 40K, and so it was a smorgasbord. So every week we would just pick a game and then we would try to play it. And so eventually about 5 or 6 of us were like, we got together and like these people would come to play 40K, and then another guy came to play Malifaux, and another guy came to play, it was Star Wars Miniatures games happening at the time. Star Wars Miniatures, and I had a Clone Wars. Mm-hmm. So none of their people showed up to play against them. So we had like, everybody had their different game system and their armies. So we're all sitting around looking at each other. And I was like, well, I wonder if there's a way that we could just take our miniatures and play against each other, right? And so me and my friend Mike cobbled together like a quick system of like saying, okay, if a rifle is a rifle and a blaster is a blaster, so if it shoots laser beams, you get 2 dice. If it shoots a bullet, you get 1 dice. And so over time, because we got sick of people not like the system's not meshing, but everybody was meeting and painting and had these really nice armies. And we found out a way where we could just play each other without having to buy into a system. We just bought the miniatures we wanted. And so that became, that evolved into the Gaddis Universal Assembly of Rules data system, right? So it was a way to have a universal game system where we could take any miniatures and play with them. And then, so I noticed that the anniversary of World War I was coming up, but there had never been a game made for the around the Harlem Hellfighters, who were the most decorated unit of World War I that fought for the Americans. So I dedicated the release of our first iteration of the game system, Shattered Crown, to the Harlem Hellfighters, even though the game was originally meant to be something else, but this is what it evolved into. So Shattered Crown became our first release, and from that, the Weird War aspect was that War of the Worlds happened.
Yep.
Which was a story. So the Martians all got wiped out by the virus, but then World War I broke out, and in the meantime, between 1880 and 1914, they were reverse engineering all of the Martian technology. So when World War I broke out, you had heat beams and Tesla coils and Martian armor, and all these really weird experiments were going on. And you still had hints of maybe these Martian cultists who were they mind controlled? Were they Martians masquerading as humans? Were they influenced by you don't know what's going on with that faction. And so that became our first game when it got released, using that rule system.
So
and
the
we
idea,
made a miniatures line for it.
The idea basically behind weird war games is it's like alternate history. It's like it's like the history that we know, but something changed, something tweaked, and then there's a different result. So yeah, no, I like that stuff a lot. Like honestly, I'll be very honest. I don't generally like historical games too much myself. Partially because like it kind of actually happened, you know what I mean? And so I'm kind of like that. I don't know. That just sort of But when there's like laser tanks and Tesla coils and it's alternate World War I or World War II or whatever, then I'm a lot more interested. Like I know that I like fishmen a lot, and I came across a game that's basically like Vietnam, except that there's also fishmen, and so I'm like, well, that's kind of cool. You know what I mean? So like I don't know that I want to play a Vietnam game because that's like somebody's grandpa or whatever, that kind of thing. But yeah, it's very interesting, and that's why I really like kind of weird war stuff when I'm going to go in that direction.
Yeah, and go ahead, man.
No, so and it also kind of gives you kind of freedom to paint outside the lines, where you don't have, the guys doing, is it rivet counters? Is that the name that I've thrown around?
Rivet counters. Yeah, I'm sorry, but there's not enough rivets on your M7 tank.
Sure,
right, yeah.
Or like the things coming on. You can kind of go, well, yeah, and this one they didn't have enough money for a rivet, so that's why there's less rivets. Like,
and it gives people the freedom to feel comfortable, like Adam said, to play in that universe, right? Mm-hmm. And maybe your army isn't exactly right, because you're going to run into that guy who's going to say, "Oh, I'm sorry, but the Napoleonic troops in that era didn't have brass toggles; they had wooden toggles." Right? Really?
Yeah,
is that what's important about this game?
Yeah.
No, it's not. I mean, what really motivated me was that I had a guy that I was playing bolt action against argue with me about the cycle rate of an MG42 machine gun and how bolt action doesn't represent it properly. And I was like, okay, number one, it's a miniatures game. Number two, everything on this table is an abstraction. Nobody has a real MG42 that we're firing here, right?
Exactly.
So it allowed us as gamers, our group, the freedom to be able to play in a game and drive a narrative. And the second thing for me is that I use that same game system in an after-school program to teach history, right? I gave the kids the game. Yeah, on a Friday, we would do open play, right? So they had the assignment that I gave them on Memorial is that they had to go home, they had to interview their parents and their grandparents and figure out who in their family served in the military, and then come back for Veterans Day and tell us about it. And then we would play the game based on what their report was. That got so many kids involved, and kids from other classes were coming in, and they were doing deep dive histories. And this one kid said, "Oh yeah, my great great granduncle served in the Buffalo Soldiers in 1890, and then my great uncle served in World War I, and my great grandfather served in World War II, and then my dad served in Desert Storm." And I was like, wow, this guy had 5 generations of people serving in the military, that he didn't know about until he did this report. So it was a way to connect those kids who were disconnected from their own history to history, right? Mm-hmm. And then so from the weird war aspects of it, because I would let them design their own weapons instead, to design their own units.
Yeah.
And that was part of the art class that we were doing. And they were able to reconnect with their families, have veterans that were in their family tell those stories, and then them feel part of that history because they could see their direct connection in their family, and also talk to their relatives, which they, have their face in their phones all the time, and they weren't talking to their uncles and their aunts or their great, these were kids who were between 11 and 16. So you had a lot of people that had 2-3 generations still alive, and in my own family, the impetus for Empire Falls was that my grandfather had served in the 761st Tank Battalion, and I didn't even realize it.
Really?
Yeah. I saw the picture of him. My uncle told me. We were watching Battle of the Bulge, and my grandfather said, "Oh, those aren't the right tanks." And I was like, "How do you know?" He goes, my great uncle Reggie said, "Because he was there." And I was like, my jaw hit the ground. I was like, "What?" Because the veterans in our family talk to each other, but they don't talk to us civilians, people who haven't served.
Sure.
So my brother, he was in the Marines. My uncle Reggie was in, my great uncle Reggie was in Korea. My granddad was in World War II. My dad was in Vietnam. So, these type of things are real history that in our family, it's an oral tradition. So if those stories aren't passed down, they're just lost. You just lose them.
Right.
And so I thought here's a great way for us to be able to take these unknown stories, right? There's a lot of stories like that that are unknown and bring these people to the forefront. So I dedicated Empire's Fall to the 761st Tank Battalion and their story of fighting at the Battle of the Bulge, which in every movie that I see, you never see Black people. You never see people of color, who fought at, there were 1,700 Black soldiers that landed at Normandy. They're never in any movies. The 761st was the spearhead for Patton tank assault against the Germans crossing the Rhine. They're never represented, but I see Fury, also
Right.
Women, Hedy Lamarr. The reason we have Bluetooth today is directly because in World War II, she developed a process called signal skip tracing, which was used to guide torpedoes from boats to submarines.
Yeah. Yes.
Right. So
Yeah,
those type of stories, I can put those in the game, make them fantastic, and then people can learn that real history because now they're exposed to it. Like in a normal bolt action game, you'd never be able to be exposed to that. But I can make that a hero character in Empire Falls, and then people can learn that history, give them a taste of it, and then they can go off on their own and explore, which is what happened in that after school program with those young kids who could care less about World War II. And then by the time that year was up, they were knee deep in it.
There's definitely that bringing that connection into it. Like, I know growing up, I was always for some weird reason, I was into World War II movies. I think just because, you'd have your Memorial Days and whatever, I wouldn't have school. And that was basically all that was on, other than like talk shows on the Mondays was, marathons. And at that time, that's when I found out my grandfather, who I shared my middle name from. He was always into the John Wayne movies and the Dirty Dozen and all that. And they're like, oh yeah, he used to sit there and watch it all the time. And I think that's what kept me still watching them. Even more was like, oh, I'm kind of like my grandfather now, and got me watching that. It was that somehow tying a personal connection and always kind of helps out.
It makes a big difference if especially for young people who are learning. I'm like, this is your place. These people did this so that you can do this today. They gave all of their tomorrow so that you could have today. And it makes it real to them. It makes it real in a way that it made an impact on that class that I didn't see. My job was trying to keep them engaged, and it turned out that they were hungry for it. They really went after it, and then. Even with the art class, we were like, well, let's, paint some miniatures, I brought in the brushes, I got some stuff donated, and things like that. And then the program, got closed down, but I'm like, well, if we incorporate this into the game, besides just our play group and launch, because Gaddis Gaming had launched in 2014 with just the tabletopper, and that was a product designed by Susan Howes. So Susan designed that. And so we were able to then, take just having World War II miniatures and say, well, why don't we make more female miniatures to, nurses and these other historical characters and really broaden the appeal, because there was a group across in Windsor from us that were doing a comic book convention, and they invited us to come over and run our games. So we went over, we ran the game. And then the next year, this, it was very popular. Susan was very popular with the girls, and they were all playing and stuff. And it's a very different cultural experience in Canada, even though it's just 10 minutes away from Detroit. Is that the next year, the girls who had played the previous year showed up, and they bought more girls. And then the third year, they were like, yeah, we're the Women of Windsor's Wargaming group. And so they started their own wargaming group.
Very cool.
And they tabled people, man. It was crazy to watch them play because they had been playing 3 years in a row now, right?
Yeah.
And they were just like, yeah, we're going to, bring it. We got our armies. We're ready to go. I was like, oh.
Lee, did tabletop gaming get you, did history get you into tabletop gaming, or were you into tabletop gaming before you got into history?
No, I started off as a D&D player when I was 8. I was a nerd. I was into science. I loved Carl Sagan, Battlestar Galactica, Star Wars. So I was a blurred. I was from day one. That was my thing. Science and the future were my thing.
Okay.
And then tabletop. So me and my dad would put together World War II airplanes as a kid. So model building was like my first introduction, and then going to going to the hobby store, I saw older guys that were doing miniatures gaming. And I remember one guy, he had a Cold War hot situation where it was Russians versus Americans on the German border. And he had this big table with these little, I think 15 millimeter, maybe 20 millimeter miniatures. And I was like, wow, that's really cool. And he goes, oh, you want to play? He goes, yeah. I'm just learning the rules. So I'm like, okay, I'll take the Russians, and he's playing the Americans. And I remember he had the felt laid out on the table and the little things underneath to make the hills. And I remember I brought my BMP over the hill, and then I shot at him and blew up one of his tanks. And I was hooked. I was like, oh my God, this is incredible. This is incredible from there. But it's just that one guy being nice to me at the game store when I was like 12 or 13 that really made the difference. Because I would walk by the stuff all the time to go to the model section, right? And I would see the miniature stuff on the walls. This was back when everything was in a little plastic baggie, you know? So, so all,
I think that definitely, I think definitely the idea that you go into a shop or something like that, or there's somebody who can become a mentor, like that can definitely get people involved in not just tabletop miniature gaming, but in any kind of tabletop gaming, whether, like if you're trying to get into Magic, like going into a store and having like even like another kid who kind of sort of, for the lack of a better term, takes you under their wing, that kind of thing. Like that stuff is a super, super important. Like that's the community aspect that really helps tabletop gaming, I think, be a good deal different than other types of gaming.
Right. That's stuff that you're not.
And I think for you, the hobby hero aspect of it, right? When you talk about, being a hobby hero, how do we be positive gamers? Because I know a couple of years after that, Warhammer came out, and those guys were just really, it was space Nazis fighting demons. And I was like, where do I fit into this game?
Yeah. No, it's depending on the local meta, like when you get really like competitive folks, that can be sometimes not as welcoming, but it's, that's why, you're right. Like on my YouTube channel, I do have a tendency to focus a bit more on the hobby aspect, but it's partially because I think it's more inclusive and more welcoming to new players. And it's also what I'm more interested in. I'm frankly a terrible player. I enjoy doing it, but I'm not good at it. At what point did you like decide you were now going to, like, you'd been gaming for long enough and everything like that, and you were really interested? You kind of touched on this, but like you talked about the tabletop, or like, was that the beginning of the game company? Is that where you started?
That was the beginning. Yeah. Well, so what happened was Susan had made one for herself, right? Because we were playing X-Wing.
And this is the thing that goes on top of the table that puts basically like pockets on the sides.
Yeah, we didn't have a proper size table to play on, right? We had the little folding table, and that was our crafting table and our gaming table, because it's perfect for when you're playing card games. But if you want to play a miniatures game, there wasn't the right size, and the kitchen table was kind of oval and not the right size. So I was talking about buying a I don't know if you remember, it was Geek Chic at the time, their Sultan table.
Yeah, they're super expensive. Super expensive.
They were $20,000, $20 grand, right? And she was like, "No, you're not." And so she designed it. She said, "Look, we can do this, and we can make this," and draw it up. And then we were picking up some cushions, because a friend of ours opened up a game store, and I was like, "Oh, we can. Here's some. Here's something that we could use." The CNC machine was cutting out the shapes.
Of like the foam?
Oh, yeah, they were cutting out the foam. And I was like, oh, here's a way that we can manufacture this with the CNC machine, with the hydraulic cutter.
Yeah.
And so went home, did the designs, brought them back, and then I have a friend that works at GM, and he needed a ride, and I was in there, and I saw this big bin with all of this, like where they put the bumpers at, and there was all this refuse in it, but there was these big chunks of foam that they cut the bumper crash guard material out of. And I'm like, they're just throwing that away? And so that day put them together. I'm like, we could use this high impact automotive foam that's being thrown away as the material to make the table out of, because it was rigid and sturdy enough to where it doesn't overhang. Like regular foam, if you let it hang out over the table, it would droop.
Sure,
right?
sure. Yeah.
But but with this, it would hang out like almost a foot and wouldn't droop. So you could, and I'm like, look, here's the design. We took the foam over to the hydraulic cutter. The guy cut the pieces out for us and put them together. And then we had a table that we could take down to the game store and put on those card tables and play with. Well, my friend Herb came in and said, oh, wow, that's really neat. Me and my son need one of these for our house so we could play at home. And we're like, okay, yeah, you can have ours. We'll make another one. So he took that one. We made another one. He came back 2 weeks later and he goes, I need 3 more. And I'm like, what? He goes, yeah, some friends of ours in the neighborhood, they want them for their playrooms. So I'm like, okay. So we made 3 more. And then it was like 10 more. I'm like, wait a minute, we're in business now.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's very organic. Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a very organic process. And then a store ordered Pandemonium Games in Garden City. They ordered 12 of them. So that's when I was like, look, we really need to do something about this. And so we formed the company. We got a patent for the design. And then we put it on Kickstarter and it got funded. Because first we were like, we had this idea, this was in the early days of Kickstarter, 2014. And we were like, we had made our first one in 2012. And then we said, look, we have this idea. We want to make this thing called the Tabletopper. Do you guys think it's a good idea? And people gave us $5,000. So we went in, we did all our R&D, we did our research, we did our prototyping. And then we said, okay, in 2015, we said, it's ready. Do you guys want to buy them? And we raised like $23,000, I think, on that Kickstarter.
Nice. For
people to buy them. Yeah. And that was the beginning of the business. And then people wanted them in Australia and they wanted them in New Orleans and they wanted them all over. And we're like, look, this is more than just I can do it. My garage was just full of foam.
I suppose.
Basement, everything. Yeah. I'm like, we need to create a business around this, and that's when Gaddis Gaming was born. And so we hired on 2 other people to help. We have a business consultant, and we're like, we want to grow this from a mom and pop business to like a startup business where we can employ people and get product out there. And so that's the process that we're going through now. And our big release this year was going to be Empire's Fall, where it's all professionally done. It's all, really nice. But, COVID-19 shut out our convention because our big plan was to work the convention circuit to socialize the game to people, right? Because once people play it, they love it, So how do we get it out to as many people as possible? If not by, it's not just going to our local game stores and getting our local groups to play, but being at the big conventions where we get all the YouTubers like Adam coming out and, people reviewing it and really putting their hands on the product. Because a lot of people, until they see our miniatures, they're like, oh my God, these are incredible. All the detail. I'm like, yeah, right. So when they see them, they really fall in love with them and they really enjoy the product that we have. So we want to make sure that we maintain that high quality and be able to get in people's hands, because our biggest advertiser are people who go and tell other people,
Right.
And so
the word of mouth. Yeah.
The word of mouth. Yeah.
Can you, speaking of the miniatures, can you walk us through, like, because you started with the tabletoppers, but then you did get into creating your own miniatures and all that kind of stuff. Like, what's the process? Like, how do you go from concept to literally like to the point where it's finished and it's something that the users or the players can get into their hands? Like, what's just like a high level, like what's the process there?
Right. When we first started off, we had a traditional 3D sculptor. Not a 3D, like a digital sculptor. We had a traditional sculptor. He was sculpting old school, using green stuff, on a dolly. And so we wanted to fill in some gaps in our miniatures line. So we went and consulted with a company called Old Glory, and they specialize in 15 millimeter and ancients.
Okay.
And they had a product that they had created, but they never launched. When we were talking to them, we were walking through their warehouse and they were showing us all of the miniatures that they make. And they had a stack of molds that were just gathering dust, right? I'm like, well, what's in these? And he goes, oh, that's a 28 millimeter line that we never launched. It never went anywhere. The guy that was sculpting it, passed away. And so we never launched it. We never able to finish it, never launched it. I'm like, you're going to tell me you have 28 millimeter miniatures sitting over here gathering dust, and you don't plan on doing anything with them? And so I bought that whole line. I'm like, I'll buy it right now. These are awesome. These will work perfect, because Bolt Action had probably only been out for like 3 years at that time.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So we bought that whole miniatures line, and then we decided, hey, we could fill those gaps. So we hired a professional sculptor. We had themes of what we wanted, what areas of the military that we wanted to fill in those gaps, and then we would I would draw up 5 poses because we can only fit 9 miniatures on a platter at a time, right? So I would draw a 10-man infantry squad, and these are all the different poses that we want. And then I send those drawings to the sculptor, and then the sculptor would do he would do the prototype. So he would say, hey, here is where I'm going with this. Do you like it? And then as long as the material's wet, he can make changes. So I have to get back to him within 48 hours and say, oh, no, I need his arms to be here, or I need, his belt to have this water canteen on it, or, any kind of details that I want. Or,
because it's a physical putty, so you have
It's a physical putty.
Right. There's a drying time, and then after that, you can't move it. Yeah.
You can't move it. Right. Yeah. So we work back and forth like that. But I try to give them as much detail in a word description and in the drawings that I give them. So when they sculpt them, and then, of course, being historical figures, I can give them actual photo reference, saying here's an actual photo of that uniform that was worn during that time, But when it's Weird War, I have to fill in a lot of gaps. I'm like, well, what does the Tesla coil thing look like? Well, this is so I have to draw it out, by hand in a 2D drawing, and then he makes a 3D sculpt of it.
And you have an artistic background, right?
Yeah. I have my degrees in illustration and design.
Okay.
So
that's helpful. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. But I've never done. But you got to remember, when I was in school, there was no such thing as 3D renders. There was,
right.
It was rapidograph pens and Bristol vellum.
Mm-hmm.
So I missed that whole revolution. So it's so engaging someone who has that skill set. It's easy for me because I can speak as one artist to another. So you can tell. So like from somebody's physical drawing, when we were in art class, I can say that guy's going to go in the sculpting, that guy's going to go in the painting, that guy's going to go. You could tell because we all had the same foundation classes, and then when we got into our disciplines, you could tell exactly who was going to be in what discipline based on what their 2D drawings style was.
Interesting.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It's how they're receiving stuff, or how they're kind of translating stuff from the
how you're perceiving the world and then translating it onto paper.
Okay.
Right. So some people have more volumetric type of drawings. Those people usually went into sculpting. People who are more loose and sketchy usually went into painting, and then people who are very meticulous usually went into graphic design.
Mm-hmm.
And those were the 3 disciplines that you could go to into what we're doing. And we even used to have to design our own letters. So lettering was a thing, which is not anymore. Because you can download 2,000 different fonts from the internet.
Once you get the masters, the mold masters all figured out and everything's happy, then you generally end up going because your stuff is predominantly all metal except
it's all metal.
Is there any resin?
There is some resin. So originally our vehicles were in metal, but they were ridiculously heavy.
Oh yeah. I bet.
So what we did was we had metal barrels and metal machine guns. And even some of our tank tracks were metal, but the bodies were all resin. Mm-hmm. And then, so what we did was we had those resculpted. So the process goes from the 2D rendering to the 3D sculpt, whether it's digital or physical. And then we cast it in a vulcanized rubber mold, a 9-inch platter. There's YouTube videos of people doing it.
And it's like a spin cast is what they call it.
It's a spin casting. Yeah, spin casting. Mm-hmm. So the original wax sculpt is lost. It's gone. It's called a wax release process. Mm-hmm. So when you forge that original mold, the thing that you originally created is replaced by the metal, and that original metal sculpt is super crisp and super clean. And then that is used to make a production mold, and then the original sculpt is then put off to the side, and then every spin that you make after that is from the production mold.
Yeah, not the original. Right.
Not the original. So when that mold burns out, you can go back cast another one from that original sculpt, because you won't have the original from that original mold, because you won't have the original sculpt anymore. Now with 3D, that's changed the process for us, because with an STL file, as long as I have that STL file, I can print out a new master at any time. But it's the same process. I take a miniature, print it out in resin, cast it in the vulcanized rubber mold, and then you have your metal miniature from there.
Right. Yeah.
And some people, we're even like experimenting with doing just some things just in resin, where we don't even go to metal. We just do if it's small enough volumes, we can 3D print them in resin and then have them. So when we did the Adepticon, we did 300 miniatures of Henry Johnson that were limited edition last year. And those were all done in resin. And that's all we made. And
you mean 3D printed resin, not spin casting resin,
right? Yeah. Not spin casting resin.
I can see, for limited edition, if you've got access to maybe multiple resin 3D printers, I could definitely see that being a way to go.
Right.
Yeah, that's just a change. That's just a change, like in the actual industry. Like that's, and I think we're going to see more of it as time goes on.
And the change is coming fast. I mean, if you look at how the technology is just advancing so fast, it's hard to really wrap your head around. But being in Detroit, we have access to industrial size printers. So I can print in one run, like the printer for the car bumpers and the hoods and the quarter panels. They're the size of a kitchen. So you can print out a whole 300-piece army in one pass, or in the areas around.
Drooling right now.
Think about it. Right now, don't you guys think this is like a golden age for gaming? With the invention of 3D printing and the availability of the internet to get anything anywhere in the world.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's it is definitely a time right now, in my opinion, where you can get, like, as a producer, as a game creator. I think right now is maybe one of the best times that there've ever been to be a game creator, because you have so many tools at your disposal. If you just want to, like, I've been playing some games and buying some games here and there that are just PDFs. So someone makes it and they don't have to work with a print company. They don't have to worry about shipping. They make it, they make a PDF, they put it up. I buy it, I get it instantly. I'm not waiting for shipping. I'm not waiting for the UPS guy, or God forbid the FedEx guy. I mean, it's a great thing. And, if you're more interested in the actual physical stuff, like the models and things like that, like you mentioned, resin printing, if you want to go down that road, I've seen some amazing work with it. 3D printing terrain with like filament printers. I mean, all these different types of stuff. And then even beyond all of that, just the actual models that we're getting in our hands from the actual companies, are amazing. But I think it's really for the DIY, almost kind of small company, I think right now is an amazing time.
Well, as a small company, I can say the access to to creative talent, for people who are freelancers or do-it-yourselfers, I think now is a great. I mean, if you're going to be creative, now is the time to do it. To put something out there if you really want to do that.
Absolutely.
And I think in the future, after we come out of this, I think next year the game stores that have survived, they will be able to, they're probably going to go through print on demand, where you will call your game store and say, I want this model. Here's the STL file, print it for me. I think that's going to be the model moving forward. That before it was games and comic books and maybe some toys or something. But I think now it's going to be people going in and getting their miniatures 3D printed. And I went to a lot of 3D shows early on in 2014, 2015. And they were like, well, someday we're going to be able to do this. And then when I saw Anvil, was it Dreamforge, came out with the colored printed mini, it's already
Hero Forge,
right?
Yeah.
My God. Game changer. Complete and total game changer. Your miniatures, not only is it printed, custom to you, but now it's painted also. It's already, colored.
Yeah, it's not. I mean, I've seen some of them up close, and they're not bad. I mean, they're not. I think it's aiming a little bit more towards that. Just to kind of get a little bit off topic, I think those things are designed to be aimed towards the folks who aren't really super interested in paint, obviously. they don't look as good as like a person who's even been doing it for a while. But
Right.
for just like, I just need to print these and get them on the board, they look, I think, really surprisingly good. I was really surprised by the quality, actually, because I don't understand the technology. Like, I understand the technology, how resin printing works and filament for the most part, but then the colored stuff, I was just like, I don't even know how you guys are doing that, but it's pretty cool.
Magic. It's
Yeah,
D&D
it seems like
magic.
it. Does seem like that. Yeah.
Yeah, but
Absolutely.
I think that's for your casual D&D type gamer, right? The people who have 10 of their friends over and they just need a miniature real quick, or they need miniatures for each character, because you can't find your female gnome druid, with the staff and the hawk, right?
Yep.
So you custom make that, because D&D has really, from when I used to play, it's really branched out into a lot of areas and to be all encompassing the way it is, with the amount of races you can playable races,
absolutely.
And the settings and environments. So I think that the way HeroClix kind of monopolize the superhero genre. All the other superhero systems, even the ones that came out with miniatures, people would just cannibalize their HeroClix and repaint them and put them in their superhero games.
Sure.
And I think that now that you can like custom create your own character, I think that a lot of people will be going to artists saying, hey, here's my drawing, can you make this for me? And then, having them make an STL file, you send that to your local game store, and then you pick it up next week when you go to play.
Right.
I think where that's heading. And I even look at third parties like with Shapeways, Pop Goes the Monkey, the stuff they're doing. I bought a Dreadnought cover, the Redemptor Dreadnought. I bought a one of the covers that looks like the Raptor, the Space Marine fighter plane they have, but it has that same kind of thing, because I didn't like the open cage on the one that I bought. And so I put that on, and man, just things that appeal to your aesthetic, to be able to just tweak your army just enough to make it unique or theme it, where you can buy, like, I don't have to hunt like what we used to do. I used to have to hunt on bits sites, to try to find that the thing that I'm looking for. Now I can buy 10 of them, exactly what I need, or 8 of them. This is exactly what I need. And as a manufacturer, for me to be able to say, hey, you want to play in our Weird War universe? Here's some unique things. I don't have to make, 100,000 of them, make my money back. I can design them. And one of the things that we're talking about internally is doing the designs for things that we think are, maybe only 300 people are going to want it, and make those available for people to download as STL files, or let other people manufacture them by selling a commercial license. That might be another revenue stream for us as a business. But for my personal hobby space, I have more ideas to do things than I do money to actually do.
No, that's definitely the case. We've got the time right now, because of the virus and stuff and lockdown. But it's, in many situations, it's either like the companies are having a hard time shipping stuff because of the difficulties with all of that, or else it's just a situation of you got the time, but you don't necessarily have the money. Maybe you have more time because you're not working, maybe, or whatever. We've been seeing that a lot. So I think it's good that we're all keeping busy on that stuff, and that's important.
Absolutely.
So
we're trying to do our part as a small mom and pop company, that because we can custom make things for people. So people will email us their army, like chain of command. The guy wanted like 29 Americans, right? He goes, so he sent us his custom army list of all the miniatures he was missing to fill in his army, and we custom made an order for him, because now he has the time to work on the project. So people who had pushed projects off because they were too busy at work or dealing with family now find that they have the time to work on those projects. And for me, just bringing up my painting skills, just the dry brush technique. When you guys talk about the makeup brush thing, my wife's mad because I raided her makeup brush store.
Oh yeah, I got mine from the dollar store or someplace, and I wanted them relatively unsullied, but yeah, that makes sense.
I had to explain to my mom why my Amazon package contained makeup brushes.
Yeah, that makes sense.
She opened it up. She's like, "Oh, these must be your wife's," and I'm like, "No, they're mine." And yeah. So, what makes you choose between metal and plastic and resin? Like
Undercuts. It's all about undercuts. So if a bit is too fragile, like a barrel of a gun, it's
Okay.
really fragile, right? So you really probably want that in metal, right? Or a
Okay.
standard or something like that. Things that are really fragile, we go to metal. If it's a little bit sturdier, we can go to the resin. And if it's like a big bulky piece, we can use the 3D print. Like
Mhm.
the AV7 tank, we experimented with using that, making it hollow in the middle, and then 3D printing them on demand because the orders weren't coming through for a whole lot of them. Whereas if we had a really large batch order doing it in resin, it's heavy, not as heavy as it would be in metal, but it's a block of resin that's sturdier. But then all the gun ports on it would be fragile, so we would cast those in metal. So the machine guns on your tanks
Okay.
and those type of things, those all
Yeah.
be metal because they're a lot more fragile and more likely to break.
An
That's how,
actual
at least that's the process that we go through.
an actual
Okay.
plastic is like that's a very expensive upfront cost because you have to have a steel mold made and all that kind of stuff. And that's why you don't
Yeah,
see
which
a lot of smaller companies doing that because it's so expensive.
it's cost prohibitive.
Yeah.
A standard, like even a small run steel mold, will cost you $10,000, and they can be as high as $50,000.
Yeah.
So that's why you don't see people with startup companies doing injection molded plastic because an aluminum mold is maybe $10,000, a steel mold will cost you about $50,000, but you can get 1 million prints out of it.
Exactly.
If you
Yeah.
plan on selling 1 million copies of something, then yeah, go for it. It's 3 cents a press.
Whereas
At that point.
resin and metal, during the normal print run on many different miniatures for metal or resin, you end up having to have the molds remade several times, don't you? Because they wear out
Yeah.
over time.
Yeah, they wear out over time. Yeah.
No, it's really interesting, just the concepts behind like the way that these things are decided and like what goes on behind the scenes to get you the piece of miniature that you're going to sit and work on, and that kind of stuff. Kind of switching gears, like what about you? Because you run a lot of playtests. You talked before about going to a lot of conventions and things like that. And like, so what are some of the tips? Like, because we like to talk here about building community and getting new people into gaming and that kind of stuff. Like, what kind of tips have you learned over the years to get people to walk up and play your game when they maybe weren't planning on doing so?
Dinner time. Our concept is dinner time.
Okay.
It's make the table pretty. Set a pretty table.
Okay.
I noticed, like, when we have that 3-legged walker out there, so many people that like would not have looked twice at a stop and goes, "Wait, what is that? What are you guys playing?"
It's kind of a big set piece, like it's a big robot. Yeah.
Having a set piece, having something that attracts their attention, right? Something that's out of the ordinary.
Mm-hmm.
So people will come over that normally wouldn't come over if you're just doing something traditional. That if you have a set piece or a terrain piece that will catch their attention and give them that minute that you need to just introduce them to the concept, and we've gotten a lot of feedback from people who wouldn't normally have looked at us sideways, but have come over because we've set a pretty table.
Mm-hmm.
So at convention, it's all about catching people's attention, not verbally, but visually.
Nice. Okay. So you get them to basically stop and look, and once you've got that,
stop and look.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, then it's off to the races.
Yeah.
Because we've had people that have played other systems that have come over, and like we had the armies already set up, and tanks. For some reason, people are just crazy about the tanks. Everybody wants a game with a bunch of tanks and a little bit of infantry. I noticed,
Yeah. No, I can back that up. Absolutely. Yeah.
People go, and so having a nice set piece and then having a tank tends to be the difference in how we've engaged people that I've noticed. And so when we have the army set up and people want to play, and I can explain the game to you in 10 minutes, so it's easy to grasp the concept, but it's deep once you start thinking about the strategies and the different combinations you can put into it. So I've had people at conventions come back 2 or 3 times and play the game, just play the demo game. It's not even the full army, because of that. And then when I say, here's the stats, you can bring your own miniatures, you can, make up your own stuff, and it's Weird War, and then it's off to the races, because then their mind is expanded around the possibilities of what's available to them.
Yeah, I've definitely, like, when running events at conventions, at small local conventions, having like I've run Song of Blades and Heroes by Ganesha Games, over in Italy, and I've run it here, and just having a lot of skeletons. Like I have this scenario that I do where each player gets like 3 heroes, and there's just groups of little 3 hero bands, but there's a lot of skeletons. I have 60, 70 painted skeletons on the table, and that just causes people to walk up and go, "What are you guys doing over here?" And that brings people into the to the hobby to some degree, or at least gives them a first step, which is really cool. With the virus, with the COVID-19, are you planning? Like, I know obviously being able to run stuff at conventions right now is obviously not happening, but like what are you doing to try to, or are you doing anything to try to, like, are you like trying to do virtual stuff like tabletop simulator or any of those types of things? I mean, do you have any kind of things that you're working on to try to spread the word a little bit more right now during this time when we're all sort of stuck?
Yeah, so I mean, it's hard for us because our revenue was spent on the convention scene, right? That's what it's geared towards. And COVID-19 struck right after Cold War, so we had made up a bunch of stuff to go to Adepticon with, right?
Yep.
So we had already printed, had the truck packed, we're ready to go, and they were like, "Nope, everything's canceled, shut down." So for us, being able to advertise and get it out there, the only way we can do it right now is use Kickstarter as a marketing tool to let people know that we're still here. These are some of the new things that we're releasing, and that we really need their support because we're a small mom and pop company, and we don't have the big reserves that a Cool Mini or Not has of millions of dollars to sit on and wait this out.
Sure.
We do plan on being here. I mean, I wish we could buy advertising on GameFor or buy advertising on the Every Other Sunday show. That would be nice.
Sure. Yeah.
Target marketing. But with the Kickstarter and getting the ball tank, which is just one miniature in a whole line of miniatures, you'll see as we keep updating our Kickstarter for the ball tank, you'll see all the other things we're working on that are going to go into Empire's fall. I think that people will hopefully help support us so that we can stay alive during the downturn and be able to produce the miniatures that we all love to play with. And even now I'm going to different venues and offering giveaways. So if you guys want a giveaway for the GameFor podcast, I'll be more than happy to offer a 10-man army deal to a commenter or subscriber, and we'll mail it directly to them. I mean, those are things that we can do to help the community out while they're stuck at home hobby, and maybe somebody doesn't have the money, but they have the time, to listen, and maybe they'll support us when things turn around. We get back.
It's a definitely very interesting time, and we should mention again the Kickstarter that you're currently doing for the ball tank, and we'll have links in the description below, both on the YouTube version of this podcast and also on the normal podcast in the show notes. I know that I have pledged because I'm going to get one of those cool ball tanks, and I think that Matt, were you looking at one too?
Oh yeah, I've got an army. The 3 ball tanks.
Matt.
Yeah, I
went on with the whole hog. He went the whole army deal.
Nice.
Yeah, because you get infantry and tokens, and like I said, I think when people see Empire's Fall this later this year, I think they'll be really impressed with the amount of stuff that you get, because it's a 2-player starter set. You get the whole game, and the ball tank is just one miniature in that whole universe. And I think the 1,200 miniatures that we currently sell on our website, it's a good way to flesh that out and to be able, if you want to play historical or if you want to play Weird War, we can scratch that itch for you. We can make that happen here at Gaddis Gaming.
Absolutely.
And everything is made here. Everything is made right here in the United States. Nothing's made overseas.
Yeah. So, absolutely. That's very cool. Well, Lee, thank you for joining us today and receiving the honor of being our first podcast guest here. We've been talking about having some guests on, and so I'm just glad we were able to bring you in and talk about how you got started in gaming, how you got started in the industry, and what you're doing going forward. Absolutely.
And I'll tell you, the pleasure is mine, man, and it's an honor to be here with you guys and to be able to share the hobby with the world. I think you are definitely our YouTube ambassador to the gaming to the gaming world, and I like the message of positive gaming, of having that positive experience at your local game store or wherever you play it. Being able to do that, I think it's important to growing the hobby.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thanks again for listening to this episode of the GameFor Podcast. If you've got questions or comments and you're watching on YouTube, please leave a comment below. If you're listening via your favorite podcast player, or you're just aren't into the whole YouTube comment section thing, then you can feel free to reach out to us via email at podcast@iamgamefor.com. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And lastly, to find out more about the GameFor platform designed to connect tabletop gamers, please check out our website at www.iamgamefor.com. That is www.iamgamefor.com. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.